You know what's genuinely disturbing about money? The people who understand it best are often the worst at keeping it. And I'm not talking about people who are bad with numbers or financially illiterate. I'm talking about genuinely intelligent people. Engineers, doctors, lawyers, software developers, academics, people who can solve differential equations, debug complex systems, or argue constitutional law, but somehow can't figure out why their savings account looks like a college student's. And here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Intelligence might actually be working against you financially. Not despite how smart you are, but specifically because of it. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research found something that should make every high IQ person deeply uncomfortable. Above a certain intelligence threshold, there is no meaningful correlation between cognitive ability and net worth when you control for income. Read that again. Smart people earn more, yes, but they don't keep more. The money comes in and the money disappears. And the gap between what they earn and what they accumulate is often staggering. A study published in the journal Intelligence found that people with above-average IQs were actually more likely to experience financial distress, including maxed-out credit cards, missed payments, and even bankruptcy, than you'd predict based on their income alone. So what's happening? Why are brilliant people broke? It's not laziness, it's not ignorance. It's a neurological trap. And if you're smart enough to understand the trap, you might finally be smart enough to escape it. Stay with me because what I'm about to walk you through will fundamentally change how you understand the relationship between your brain, your intelligence, and your bank account. Let's start with the mechanism that does the most damage. Overthinking. And I don't mean casual deliberation. I mean the kind of recursive, multivariable analysis that intelligent people can't turn off. Research from the University of Virginia found that people with higher cognitive ability engage in significantly more counterfactual thinking, the mental process of simulating alternative outcomes. What if I'd bought that stock? What if I'd waited for a better deal? What if this investment underperforms? What if the market crashes the week after I invest? Normal brains run dozens, hundreds. They model every possible outcome, weight every variable, and by the time they've finished analyzing, the opportunity is gone. Behavioral economists call this analysis paralysis, but that term doesn't capture how neurologically violent this process actually is. Functional MRI research from Caltech showed that when highly analytical individuals face financial decisions under uncertainty, their prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for complex reasoning, essentially hijacks the decision-making process from the limbic system. The rational brain overrides the instinctive brain so completely that no decision gets made at all. The result? Intelligent people sit on cash. They delay investing for years because no option survives their scrutiny. They research 47 index funds and choose none. They read every book on real estate investing and never buy a property. They understand compound interest intellectually and still haven't opened a brokerage account because they're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect allocation, the perfect market conditions. And here's the brutal math. Someone with average intelligence who invested $500 a month starting at 25 in a simple index fund will have over $1.3 million by 65 at historical average returns. The brilliant person who spent 10 years analyzing and started at 35 with the exact same contribution, they end up with roughly $600,000. The overthinking didn't protect them. It cost them $700,000. Your intelligence gave you the ability to see every possible risk, and that ability paralyzed you into the single worst financial decision you can make, which is making no decision at all. But overthinking is just the first trap. The second one is more insidious because it feels like a strength. Intelligent people are exceptionally good at rationalizing bad financial behavior. Research from Cornell University found that people with higher cognitive ability are actually better at constructing logical-sounding justifications for decisions they've already made emotionally. Psychologists call this motivated reasoning, and smart people are world-class at it. You don't buy the $80,000 car because you want it. You buy it because you calculated the total cost of ownership, factored in the reliability ratings, amortized the premium over the expected lifespan, and determined that the per-mile cost differential versus a cheaper vehicle was actually quite reasonable when you account for maintenance intervals and resale value. That entire argument sounds bulletproof, and it is, logically, but it was constructed after the emotional decision was already made. Your limbic system said, "I want that car," and your prefrontal cortex, that brilliant analytical engine you're so proud of, immediately went to work building a fortress of logic around an emotional impulse. A study from Princeton's Department of Psychology found that higher intelligence correlates with more sophisticated post hoc rationalization. The smarter you are, the more convincing your justifications sound, to yourself and to others. You can talk yourself into almost anything and make it sound like the rational choice. This is why intelligent people carry absurd amounts of student loan debt for degrees that don't produce proportional income. Why they lease luxury cars they can't afford because they ran the numbers and made it make sense. Why they buy homes at the absolute top of their budget because the tax deduction and equity building made it seem optimal on a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was right, the decision was still wrong. Because the spreadsheet didn't account for the stress, the inflexibility, the vulnerability to any unexpected expense. It didn't model the psychological cost of being house poor or car poor. It just ran the numbers your emotional brain wanted it to run. And here's what makes this trap so dangerous. You can't fact-check your own motivated reasoning because you're the one building the argument. You're both the lawyer and the judge. And the lawyer is brilliant. Now let's talk about the third trap, and this one is going to be uncomfortable. Intelligent people often have a deeply dysfunctional relationship with status. Research from the journal Psychological Science found that people who were praised for intelligence as children, as opposed to effort, develop what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a fixed mindset around their identity. Their self-worth becomes fused with being perceived as smart, and that fusion creates a very specific spending pattern. When your identity is built on being the smart one, you unconsciously spend money in ways that signal intellectual status. You don't buy a watch. You buy the watch that signals you understand craftsmanship and heritage. You don't eat out. You dine at the restaurant that signals culinary sophistication. You don't go on vacation. You travel to destinations that signal worldliness and cultural depth. None of these purchases are random. They're identity maintenance. And identity maintenance is the most expensive habit a human being can have because it has no ceiling. There's always a more refined version of whatever you're buying, a better bottle of wine, a more exclusive experience, a subtler status signal that only the truly sophisticated would recognize. Research from the University of Warwick found that status-driven spending is virtually immune to income increases. When intelligent people earn more, they don't save the surplus, they upgrade the signal. The car gets nicer, the neighborhood gets better, the vacations get more curated, the gap between income and savings stays constant, or worse, it widens. And this is the trap within the trap, because intelligent people don't think of themselves as status-driven. They think of themselves as discerning, appreciating quality, making informed choices. The rationalization engine fires up again, building elegant arguments for why the expensive option is actually the smarter choice. But the bank account tells a different story, and the bank account doesn't care how sophisticated your justification is. Trap number 4 is something neuroscientists call temporal discounting asymmetry, and it affects intelligent people in a way that's genuinely counterintuitive. Most people heavily discount the future. $1 today feels worth significantly more than $1 in 10 years. That's normal temporal discounting, and it's well documented. But intelligent people do something strange. They discount the future selectively. Research from University College London found that people with higher cognitive ability are actually capable of valuing future rewards appropriately in abstract scenarios. Give them a hypothetical about retirement savings and they'll make the optimal long-term choice every time. But in real spending situations, with real money, real emotions, and real social pressure, their temporal discounting looks identical to everyone else's. In other words, intelligent people know they should save for the future. They can calculate exactly how much they need. They understand compound interest better than most financial advisors. But when they're standing in front of a purchase that triggers their identity, their status needs, or their emotional state, all of that knowledge evaporates. A study from Carnegie Mellon found that the correlation between financial literacy and actual financial behavior is shockingly weak. Knowing the right thing to do and doing the right thing are processed by completely different neural systems. Knowledge lives in the prefrontal cortex. Behavior is driven by the limbic system, the basal ganglia, the dopamine reward pathways. And intelligence primarily enhances the prefrontal cortex. It makes you better at knowing. It does almost nothing for doing. This is why you can explain the mathematics of compound interest to a room full of PhDs, and most of them still won't have an adequate retirement fund. The knowledge is there. The behavior isn't a knowledge problem. It's a systems problem. And intelligent people keep trying to solve it with more knowledge. Which brings us to trap number 5, the most psychologically devastating one. Intelligent people believe they should be able to figure money out through thinking alone. This is the meta trap, the trap that keeps all the other traps in place. Because when an intelligent person struggles with money, they don't think something is wrong with my system. They think something is wrong with me. I'm smart enough to figure this out. And then they do what intelligent people always do when facing a problem. They research, they read books, they watch videos, they consume more information, they learn about index funds, tax loss harvesting, backdoor Roth conversions, asset allocation strategies, the efficient frontier, and none of it changes their behavior. Because the problem was never information. The problem is that their brain treats financial management as an intellectual challenge to be solved. Research from MIT's Behavioral Economics Lab found that the most financially successful individuals, regardless of intelligence level, shared one common trait. They relied on automated systems rather than ongoing decision-making. They didn't budget through willpower. They automated transfers. They didn't resist spending through discipline. They removed access to spending triggers. They didn't invest through analysis. They set up recurring purchases and stopped looking. The intelligent person's instinct is the opposite. They want to optimize everything manually. They want to find the perfect strategy and execute it through superior reasoning. And that instinct, that need to be the smartest person in the financial room, is exactly what keeps them broke. Because here's the truth that no intelligent person wants to hear. The optimal financial strategy isn't the one with the highest theoretical return. It's the one you actually follow. And the one you actually follow is almost always the boring, automated, unsexy one that requires zero intelligence to maintain. A target date retirement fund that auto-balances isn't as efficient as a manually optimized portfolio. But the person who set up the target date fund and forgot about it will almost certainly outperform the brilliant investor who's constantly tinkering, timing, analyzing, and ultimately underperforming because of their own behavioral interference. Research from Dalbar's quantitative analysis of investor behavior consistently shows that the average investor underperforms the market by 3 to 4 percentage points annually. Not because they pick bad investments, because they buy and sell at the wrong times, driven by emotional responses that intelligence amplifies rather than dampens. Smart people feel the fear more acutely during downturns because they understand the mechanisms. They model the worst cases more vividly. Their prefrontal cortex generates more detailed catastrophe scenarios. And then they sell at the bottom, exactly like everyone else, but with a much more sophisticated justification for why selling was the rational move. So here's the question. If intelligence is the problem, what's the solution? And this is where it gets hopeful, because the solution isn't becoming less intelligent. It's redirecting your intelligence toward the right target. Instead of using your brain to analyze investments, use it to design systems that remove you from the decision-making loop entirely. Automate your savings, automate your investments, set up the transfers, and step away. Your brain will scream that you should be optimizing, monitoring, adjusting. Ignore it. That scream is the trap instead of using your analytical ability to justify purchases. Install a 72-hour rule. When you want to buy something over a certain dollar amount, wait 3 days. Not because you need time to think about it, but because you need time for the emotional charge to dissipate. Research from the University of Texas found that purchase desire decreases by an average of 50% after a 72-hour delay. Your rational brain doesn't need more time to analyze. Your emotional brain needs time to calm down, so it stops feeding your rational brain biased inputs. Instead of building sophisticated budgets you'll never follow, simplify to the point of boredom. Research from the University of Chicago Booth School found that the most effective budgeting systems have fewer than 5 categories, not because simple systems are better in theory, but because simple systems are the only ones that survive contact with real human behavior. Instead of pursuing the intellectually stimulating financial strategy, pursue the psychologically sustainable one. Your ego will resist this. It'll tell you that you're too smart for a 3-fund portfolio, that you should be doing something more sophisticated, that simple strategies are for simple people. That voice is the trap. That voice has been keeping you broke. And here's something nobody tells intelligent people about money. You need to grieve the fantasy of the optimized financial life, the perfect portfolio, the ideal timing, the flawless strategy. That fantasy is seductive because it rewards your strongest trait, your ability to think. But it's a fantasy, and clinging to it costs you real money every single year. Research from behavioral finance pioneer Mayer Statman at Santa Clara University found that investors who accepted good enough strategies and stopped pursuing optimal ones accumulated significantly more wealth over 20-year periods. Not because good enough was theoretically superior, because good enough was actually implementable by a real human being with real emotions and real cognitive biases. The wealthiest people I've studied aren't the smartest. They're the most automated. They made a few good decisions years ago, set up systems to execute those decisions automatically, and then spent their mental energy on earning more rather than optimizing what they already had. Because here's the final piece of this puzzle. Your intelligence is an incredible asset when pointed at income generation, building skills, solving problems, creating value, advancing your career, starting businesses. That's where analytical horsepower produces real returns. But once the money is earned, your intelligence becomes a liability if you don't contain it. The earning phase rewards thinking, the keeping phase rewards systems, and the growing phase rewards patience and non-interference. Most intelligent people are phenomenal at phase 1. They earn well, but they sabotage phases 2 and 3 by applying the same cognitive intensity that made them successful earners to a domain where cognitive intensity is counterproductive. Your brain got you the money. Your brain is also spending the money. And the same neural architecture that makes you brilliant at your job makes you terrible at leaving your investments alone, living below your means without sophisticated justification, and accepting that the boring strategy is the optimal strategy. You're not broke because you're not smart enough. You're broke because you're too smart for your own financial good. And the moment you understand that distinction, everything changes. So if you recognize yourself in any of this, if you've been stuck in the analysis loop, the rationalization cycle, the status trap, or the knowledge without action gap, here's what I want you to do this week. Pick one financial behavior. Just one. Automate it completely. Take your brain out of the equation. Set up the automatic transfer, the recurring investment, the systematic savings, and then do the hardest thing your intelligent brain will ever be asked to do. Walk away. Don't check it. Don't optimize it. Don't analyze whether you picked the perfect fund or the ideal savings rate. Just let the system run, because the greatest financial advantage you'll ever have isn't your intelligence, it's your willingness to stop using it where it doesn't belong. You've been solving the wrong problem with the right tool, and that mismatch has cost you more than you realize. But now you see the trap, and seeing it is the first step toward escaping it. If this changed how you think about your own relationship with money, drop a comment and tell me which trap hit the hardest. And if you want more deep dives into the psychology behind financial behavior, subscribe, because the most expensive mistakes in personal finance aren't made by people who don't know enough. They're made by people who know too much and can't stop themselves from acting on it. Your intelligence isn't the problem, how you deploy it is. And now you know the difference.